I think for many companies, this is just part of an ongoing digital transformation, right? Either they will get transformed so that they can use new technologies and remain competitive, or they will slowly and gradually, fizzle out and die because they will be kind of like disrupted by younger companies that
Sure.
can now do other things, right?
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Deep Learning with PolyAI, the only podcast that now features a little bit of greenery in the background for both host and guest. I see a wisp of a tree there. Nice, very nice, along with the lovely PolyAI logo. How you doing, Nikola?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So I take it this is the new office coming together?
Oh, it's come together wonderfully. This is our London HQ in Paddington, and it's wonderful.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to come out and visit the space. In the meantime, let's dive right into today's topic. Nikola, I wanted to talk to you about a CIO magazine article on CIO.com that I recently read that was basically highlighting the fact that digital first is dead, AI first is the wave of the future. We know this, we believe in it. That's why we're in the space. Also recently in the news, Duolingo making a little bit of a shakeup by announcing that they're leaning into an AI first philosophy as a rationale for why they're pretty much axing all of their translator contractors in a very anti-human move. We'll talk about that in just a second, but AI first is definitely the new era of business. So I wanted to talk with you about AI first approaches, practices, and how enterprises are adopting that sort of philosophy. When you hear AI first, what do you think?
I mean, I think it's a buzzword, right? And I don't think it can mean whatever you want it to mean. I think that it's a commitment by enterprises to use AI to become a much better company. What
Right.
that will mean, I think in the context of digital or AI first, it really means that, you're going to have a much more interactive layer of sophisticated technology that you use to interact with your customers rather than just telling them to go online and look for the right answer themselves.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but, you know, is it that much different than organizations that sort of found their bearing in a digital first era? So companies like Airbnb, Netflix, DoorDash, any of those, they're also making efforts to move into that AI first organization, being digital native enterprises. What are they doing, or why are they taking that step? Are they sort of abandoning their roots, or are they just leaning into the future of business?
Well, I mean, I think these are their roots and their birthright, right? I mean, a lot of those companies, we work with some of them.
Yeah.
They started using technology to disrupt existing processes and to create like a better service for end consumers, right? Whether it's like disrupting, what do you say, accommodation, food delivery, book delivery, or whatever, retail at large.
Sure.
I think that them using new generations of technology like AI to become a better version of that business only makes sense, right? I think that for them, agentic AI really means that they'll be able to do things in a more natural way. It gives them an overabundance of where, maybe you previously would not have had highly trained humans calling people to, confirm that they got their order or to troubleshoot a process or, just they were trying to do things maybe in a more cost efficient way. Now they're able to just do it at large, providing the highest possible kind of like concierge level of service to absolutely everyone, where it makes sense, right? And then I think, well, you mentioned Duolingo. I think for them, I don't know what they've done with their contractors and translators, but you and I have done many a friend's quest on right?
We are, in fact, Duolingo pals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that their new AI features are, a brave new era for them. I think the voice one is not very good at all. I don't know if you've spoken to Lily, right? And at least that's what the avatar is called in French. Well, for French Duolingo. And, I think it gets interrupted. It's a very bad implementation of Bargin, right?
Yeah.
The speech recognition is atrocious. Maybe my French is atrocious. That's almost definitely. But it doesn't really, like, it's examples of what we call double hallucinations, where it mishears what you said and then kind of like continues the conversation in a completely random way. Like, I don't want to use that feature. They're
Right.
pushing very aggressively. I don't think it's good. I think it could be implemented a lot better. If they're listening, I'm willing to provide free feedback
Nice.
on a protocol. Maybe we can even help them. Um, but yeah, I think that like for them, that whole new service, right? Whether it's like the conversational bit when you chat or when you speak with voice, um, is just a French. There are platforms like Italki and others where you would be paired with either other people to practice languages or with a tutor where you would pay.
Right.
This is using AI to provide an overabundance of that to anyone on demand, any time of day or night. Ideally, with context and everything. It's great. I think it's the next part of their evolution as a company, right? It's how they provide a better version of their service. Because I think a lot of people were always skeptical about, can Duolingo actually teach you a language or past like enough to order in a restaurant, right?
Right.
And that interaction and interactive conversational bit is what was often found lacking. So once they get it right, they will be the better version of themselves.
I would assume so, and it's easy when they sort of get their start as a native digital organization, being a mobile app. The fact is that they've even addressed outright and said outright in public communication. The CEO said, "Look, we're willing to face those stumbling steps because
Mhm.
we're adding 148 new languages to our database, and it's happening basically overnight." So you look at the pros and cons there. I think the problem with how they addressed it was they came out and used it as sort of a rationalization piece as to why they were doing these massive layoffs. Again, contractors, translation. They're also allegedly putting a hiring freeze on any new hires where the process can be automated. And so it's just one of those things where it leans into, I think, sort of anti-AI rhetoric about how this is replacing people when they're also in the same breath saying we're very supportive of our employees. I want to make sure that employees come first. So it's just a little bit about how it's approached. Similarly, there could be an AI first whitewashing when it comes to AIification of some business silos or operational silos within an organization, whether it's digital or not. And you know, sort of taking a tiptoe approach into that concept of being an AI first enterprise. Is that effective for some businesses? If so, what industries do you see as being sort of a stepping stone approach maybe works for them, whereas others maybe are better suited to just go whole hog?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there will be businesses completely reimagined where like the level of service or capabilities are entirely different with AI, right? Um, Again, I think you'll probably have to build some of those businesses from the ground up with a different set of
Sure.
assumptions. It's fairly difficult for companies to reinvent their business model entirely. Um, with this Duolingo thing, it does sound like a bit of kind of like, as you said, both leaning into the AI angle and, that helps your share price, right?
Right. Of course.
Um, Doing a bit of a Klarna move, right? Um,
Very much.
at the same time, yeah, when it kind of like backfires and, you know, turns into the negative side of the narrative, it's usually not true. And then they kind of have to backtrack like Klarna did, right? So yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I'm not, I don't have any information, to do with them. I think that for other businesses that, are using AI, I think everyone's trying, right? And I think that
Yeah.
on an individual level, the productivity boosts of using, ChatGPT for, writing, correcting text, or using tools like, say, Gong, right, for sales,
Right.
where they are a 10x differentiator when it comes to, building a better organization, knowing how people are doing, whether they're following the process, what they could do better, providing coaching to, say, sales reps for sales calls, like, hey, ask more questions, or, you know, um, qualify this part of the conversation before you start delivering a case study, right? I
Sure.
think teams that use these things are superior to teams that don't these days, and that's fairly uncontroversial, right? I think that in terms of like AI first, I think there's a lot of just, you know, again, like we've talked about this a few times, but this is the new cloud moment, and companies don't want to be seen as missing out on it. But I feel like, there's more talk of AI than real AI touching human lives so
That's
far.
true.
But
So it's more speculative at this stage. And To your point, most enterprises, I think, benefit from that chunked out approach. Looking at how do we provide better automation in sales, or how do we provide better analysis, data collection, campaign efficacy and marketing, content creation, et cetera. That's a good application for LLMs these days. When it gets to a point where each business silo has its own tool and AI functionality in place to sort of accelerate their responsibilities, at what point do they need to look at one of the things the article comments on is sort of an intelligent enterprise operating system? So more or less the one master board, the master application to rule all of those AI, that agentic AI in each of the business functions. How far away is that in the future? Do you think it's going to be the standard?
I mean, I don't think the standard has been defined. I think that, we're going through defining protocols and approaches to like how the different ages will exchange information. And that's basically the whole like API layer, so they can even communicate with each other.
True.
I think there's a lot of buzzwords and things that people are trying to like define, right? And like a lot of people are trying to name their respective categories, right? So quite a lot of it going on. We'll see what actually sticks. I think for many companies, this is just part of an ongoing digital transformation, right? Either they will get transformed so that they can use new technologies and remain competitive, or they will slowly and gradually, fizzle out and die because they will be kind of like disrupted by younger companies that
Sure.
can now do other things, right? Um,
And not just do them, but do them better and faster. And that's the nature of competitive enterprise, right? So does that enterprise operating center become the de facto uh, infrastructure for any business in the future? Literally every business?
I mean, I really think it depends on what kind of business it is, right? I think like, the
I
right
mean, if you're
tool.
cutting down trees, like there's only so much you need with regards to a technological infrastructure. You have a chainsaw, you have your team, and you're cutting down trees. But any sort of like business oriented or even moderately tech adoptive industry, it seems is going to transform to this, much as cloud sort of usurped on prem. And
Well, it did, right? But in cloud as well, we had different players come up. And in different parts of like the software stack, we've had, some existing on-prem players move into kind of like a cloud offering that then, became a new thing. Like in CCaaS, for example, Genesis and Nice both have transitioned to the cloud, right?
right,
Avaya did not as well, right? And therefore they're no longer the number one. They used to be untouchable, right? So I think in that example, you had like the winners and the losers of cloud, and you had, more kind of cloud native players come in, and they've not necessarily won yet or at all in a lot of these spaces. Like Genesis and Nice are still bigger than Talkdesk, right?
right.
And it's like an example in our space. Um, so I don't know. I mean, I think that like in the future we'll just have to see which of the existing kind of like SaaS offerings, or it depends on the area, right? Which of them will integrate the right AI features to keep their market share, and where
Mhm.
kind of like a distinctive, new AI feature is enough to justify transfer costs and the effort, and kind of like just train people onto a new thing. Um, so yeah, I don't know that we can speak generally. I don't know what it means. But I think that there will be more AI in every software stack, right? And
That's not a very aggressive stake in the ground, then, Nicola. I mean, it seems like software companies. It seems like the application layer is right. Obviously, we know the application layer is right for AI augmentation. Is it that the CCASs of the world, the cloud-based CCASs of the world, basically try and jump ahead of progression in house so that they can say, "Look, yes, AI first. We're moving to AI first," similar to some of those other companies that I mentioned earlier, that's powering the way that our operations are providing value for our clients. So still stick with us, but the idea of software licensing or anything to that effect is sort of going by the way of the dodo.
well, I mean, okay, if you look at CCaaS and for the audience, it's called contact center as a service. These are like basically the operating systems for contact centers. It's the agents
Right.
create workforce management, all of that.
Right.
Like for those guys, they have a fundamental business model problem where they charge per seat, right?
Right.
So if they go AI first and they really lean into kind of like just providing a lot of that labor, right? And for us, I think, um, we have a number of clients where our systems do the work of at least 1,000 people every single day, right?
Yeah. Labor
Um,
costs are solved for, yeah.
and in doing that, we're like a cloud vendor where we charge on a consumption-based model, sometimes outcome-based when we can define outcomes precisely, right? That's different from selling seats for agents, right? And if you're selling both, they compete with each other because
Right.
if our systems do the work of half the people in the contact center, and you now have 1,000 instead of 2,000 seats, you've cannibalized half of your kind of like licensed revenue line. And through that, we've seen, for example, in that industry, a lot of them talk about AI as a purely defensive maneuver against companies doing this stuff and kind of like undercutting their revenue base. Now, of course, they're trying to, and on their own terms, they're trying to reconcile the two models by pricing in a way that kind of like maybe preserves seat count or charges more without it feeling like, they're really trying to just kind of like take two different like P&L lines and, um, grow the whole bucket as much as they can. But it's not really, it's not happening fast enough. So I think there's just like them talking about AI first, and AI is, for example, all they talk about doesn't mean much, right? Because
Right.
what they're really trying to do is just like augment human operations. They're making small incremental moves instead of like looking at the whole gamut of like, look, we could have AI do most of the work, and then, humans will do the rest.
Well,
Um,
we've seen a lot of progressive businesses out there that have identified that you can't chase both those P&Ls, right? Because one is going to inevitably cannibalize the other. And organizations like Tata, which is a big business process outsourcer, especially in the contact center, they're moving almost completely away from that idea of agent-based licensing into AI consultative practices. And that market, or their penetration in that market, is flying through the roof. So some people are definitely choosing one horse over the other horse. Um, is there really a feasible way to approach both if you're making decisions on behalf of those CCaaS providers out, or generalized enterprise application providers out there that are trying to preserve both old world and new?
I think it depends, right? It really depends on how much of the new world they think they can claim for themselves while still providing because
Okay,
these are huge businesses, right? If you look at like Genesis and NICE, they're both like $2 billion a year
sure,
businesses, right? Just keeping the whole thing chugging along is, you know, work cut out for a few thousand people, right? So when you look at them, like they'd have to basically build a radically different company in order to kind of like capture the new world. So, um, yeah, I don't think they're going to be the winners of this. It's definitely not playing out that way. But I think that there's a lot of people, and I think the rate of adoption of cloud wasn't the same in every part of like the software stack, right? In
right,
some places it went really fast, and some it didn't. It really depends on both like kind of like regulatory requirements or whether you're sat behind a computer with a good internet connection or not, right? There were people who genuinely still just wanted like applications um, on their computers, and
right.
it took a bit of time until they looked, until they were as good in a browser as they were kind of like in their original state. And now like people, don't remember how to install a new application on their computer, right? So it's yeah, I mean, like I think that in this particular case, the AI lift is pretty heavy, and it's a different
Right.
kind of business to the one that they're doing. So, they won't get to claim that world. Um, but again, I don't know that this provides a general answer to like all of enterprise platforms,
Right.
because I think CRM is not really going to be disrupted in the same way, not for a while. And I think that, for example, Salesforce is in a pretty good spot when it comes to just how dominant they are in their market to just continue to integrate AI features and create the right like protocols for communicating with new kinds of AI, and then eventually to even own and sell a lot of them, because they're again like I think cloud companies like, well, let's introduce more buzz. Cloud native companies are in a good spot to benefit from being AI first companies, right?
Sure. Very
Um,
true.
their pricing models are, for the most part, more aligned with the way that you would charge for AI, for the way that AI costs when you kind of like look at like the ongoing model cost for running continuous services and stuff. It's not tied to that human labor or seats or anything like that, but maybe the number of requests. So whether it's a human agent or an AI agent, you know, writing something into the CRM, pulling something from the CRM, it doesn't really matter, right? And I think that workflows built around it, those kind of like cloud first consumption based models, those have a bigger moat and one more, well, less susceptible to disruption by AI because they've got the right model to charge for AI. So I think
Right.
they'll get to introduce, tolls on the road for either third parties providing AI, or they'll just get to kind of like make their first party offerings all that much more appealing because of that integration they already have.
Pretty interesting to think that they're going to be the ones introducing tolls to the road that they're sort of paving.
Well, I mean, isn't that the role of government?
Hey, going back to, we chatted a little bit about Duolingo and you mentioned Klarna, two kind of high profile examples of organizations that have openly embraced AI, but did so in a way that came across as being a little tone deaf to their human employees. It happens, like there's an inevitability that with increased operational efficiency, businesses being profit, engines by trade, that they're going to do what's best for the bottom line. Sometimes that means either job replacement, job supplementation. But there's also, as we say, we're solving human problems, we're solving customer problems for our client organizations, and we see a lot of upskilling in our particular function. What is a way that organizations can embrace this concept, and more or less, what is the political speech that they can offer to keep their human employees motivated in times where there is this pervasive fear that AI first means human negative?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what tone they need to adopt. I think that the first question is it actually true? Right. And, when Benioff says that he's not hiring engineers because, agent force has increased his blah, blah, blah thing, um, like, I don't really know what that means, right? I think obvious for most people who've run like teams, that small teams of really good people can like outrun bigger teams, even when like the people are not bad, because like the management overhead and communication just kind of like slows everything down. Decisions are made more slowly. People work on stuff without letting other people know. It's just like it's hard to keep a coherent thread, right? So um I don't think, like I've had many people ask like, hey, will we have like junior software engineers in the future or this or that? And it's just like the fact that people are more productive just means you get to do more work, right? For
Right.
PolyAI and me, we get to, you know, like we never have enough deployment people to kind of like onboard all the clients that we're closing, right? And that's been a
Right.
perpetual story of growth. Um, like you have more stuff, right? And there's like a huge demand for all this, especially for these companies that are like kind of like AI first or like tech companies that are winning a lot of their market. Like I really don't know how they got themselves in a point where they sound like private equity administrators who are bragging about not hiring like a few extra engineers, or it's just kind of like defeats the purpose of being a tech company to begin with, right? Um, if you are more productive, then build more, build new product lines, build better
Right.
product. I mean, in the case of Salesforce, I don't know why I still have to watch that 7-second loading thing every time I open it, right? So I think maybe he could hire some engineers or reassign some people to actually fix that finally, right?
Right.
Um, so yeah, I don't really like. I think there's like Wall Street talk designed to, you know, how people talk about SEO for an LLM. I mean, these guys are basically spewing out like words that they want the Wall Street to hear, to kind of like assign some like AI uplift gradient, right? And you hear increasingly like companies, share price dropped because investors didn't see enough AI adoption. It's like, okay, like I don't know what that means. Like I don't know how how is this measured? And I think we just have to go back to the fundamentals, right? Whether you're using AI or common sense or God knows what else to be a better business, you should be
Right.
evaluated on, are you a good business? And, different businesses are measured in different ways. For some, it's like growth. For some, it's a profit margin or number of customers or bookings. But I feel like this abstract, how AI do you feel to me?
Right.
Uh, like it's the hype zone at its best. So
At its
uh,
peak. Yeah, that
yeah.
sounds like a really good topic for a future episode, is just talking about the AI effect on just market VC activity in general. Like, are these expectations founded? I think we could probably talk for a double episode on that, but We're wrapping up on time here today, Nikola. Thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure to chat with you. And yeah, let's come together again and discuss the crazy, volatile, anxious world of investment, of tech investments around AI expectations.
Yep.
For the rest of you, we'll chat with you next week. Thanks again, Nikola.